Alright y'all, welcome back, and it's time for an update on the Belair air conditioning install. So we're not doing this one as a full-on nut and bolt how-to. This is more just kind of catching you guys up on what's going on of how we're installing a vintage air conditioning system in the 59 Belair. And it's really cool, honestly. It's just been, relatively straightforward process. Lots of nerve-wracking parts that I've never really seen before, but honestly ones that I can't speak to as an expert. So I'm not going to try and do a how-to because frankly it's not my place. But I'm going to catch you guys up on what I have done so far and maybe some challenge points I've run into, as well as some things I was impressed with about the system. So I decided to compartmentalize the install. That would minimize the downtime of the car being off the road. So what I focused on first was basically getting the interior components and all of the underdash stuff knocked out, and then basically kind of everything up to and through the firewall done. And then I could move on to doing the engine bay stuff as its own standalone project. And that's where we stand now. So I'm going to walk you through what I have done and kind of the major steps of the interior install. And I'll let you kind of take a look at what it looks like now that it's all in. So as you can see, we now have vents underneath our dash, and that is the main control unit underneath there that does all the magic. And you can kind of see the ductwork under there as well. So basically, it's a pretty intelligent way that they set it all up, and it's definitely designed for someone with, a moderate level of experience as far as like working on cars. Nothing's really wildly complex, but it's just, they do a good job with the instructions of kind of making it, piece by piece, step by step, to where if you take your time, it's pretty understandable and pretty straightforward. My system is the Gen 4, so it comes with these kind of 3 different dial controls. I've chosen just to use the mounting pod that it comes with. However, they do provide a template if you were to want to drill holes or something in your own dash and just have the knobs sticking through. This is just to get me running for now, and at some point I do think I'll make a fancier control setup. But it was really quick and easy to install that, and that got me, at least close to up and running with the components provided. And then as you can see, I've moved my gauges for the air ride system to hang below these central vents, because as you remember, they used to hang from the dash where those vents are now, and that actually all went pretty well. Everything kind of behaved. So an interesting note, because of the size of the main unit for the AC, they actually provide you with a new glove box liner. So instead of the old kind of more cardboard material one, they provide you with this one that's like a hard plastic, but it is significantly shallower. So if you see my finger, basically the depth just comes to my knuckle there for the bottom. So I'm actually probably going to maybe 3D print some sort of little, stand-up thing where I can tuck my documentation, like the registration and everything, in the back there, and then still have a small surface that's workable. One little custom feature that I couldn't resist doing was I drilled a hole in the side of the glove box so that the factory glove box illumination bulb would actually still work. It did not have this hole from the factory, so I just kind of lined it up and put a hole in it so I could at least get a little light in the glove box. Obviously, when the car is on, that will work. So to install the unit, you basically remove your old heater, which basically used to sit right there. So basically I ripped that unit out. I had already disconnected it a while back, and they provide you with this blanking panel. And essentially, you just put a thick bead of sealant around the blanking panel. It goes up from the inside. Definitely a 2-person job there. And essentially you then put these 4 outer bolts in, and that draws it up against the firewall and seals it up nicely. The other 2 bolts that you see there actually go into the mounting bracket for the main unit itself. That's actually how it mounts to the firewall. Then what you can't really see, this is going to be really tricky to film, I'll be very impressed if I can get it. Hey, there we go. So that little cap there goes over, it used to just be a blocked off circle, and essentially that's where all your lines run through. I was quite impressed. It's actually a nice kind of tidy, hidden little area for those lines to pop out of. And then as you can see there, this grommet actually used to be where one of the body plugs that held the original sound deadening mat used to be. So I just opened that up with a drill bit, put the grommet in, and that's where I'm running my wiring through. And I will kick it over to where the hoses are, just to, in some black loom, just to make it a little more clean. But that's what we're working with. So these 4 hoses are basically the 2 air conditioning ones right here, and then you've got the 2 heater hoses, one here and one here. And essentially, that's the 4 major connections to the system. So I've got them bundled and just zip tied to my fender liner for now to keep them off my header. Same thing with the wire. I've just got that bundled for now until I can get into all my bracketry. But I've been able to just drive the car around like that with no issue. As far as the other mounting bracket for the main unit, it basically comes up kind of behind the glove box and essentially mounts to the back of the cavity where the windshield wipers come up throughout there. Let me see if I can show you, but essentially it kind of kicks backwards, and inside these louvers here, oh wow, it's going to be really tricky to show you, but basically the sheet metal on the back side here, there's 2 screws that come through and hold that up. And the placements that they tell you to drill in, or basically where it naturally lines up, do work quite well. They don't interfere with anything. So yeah, I just put a little thread sealant on them just in case, to prevent any water or moisture from making its way through the threads and into the inside of the car. So looking up underneath here, we've got the 2 main connections for the control harness, and then also the actual main wiring harness. So the smaller one right over, let me see if I can find my finger in the camera here. Well, anyway, there it is. Okay, so this small one here is for the controls. The bigger one is the main wiring harness itself. And basically, the wiring really is relatively straightforward for this. The control harness just connects to 3 potentiometers, and there's clear instructions on which ones are which. And then the wiring harness, depending on what vehicle you're connecting it to and what features your system has, it walks you through exactly what you need. So that purple wire that's coiled up there is actually my switched 12 that I will be connecting once I'm ready to go with the system. That's the one that kind of wakes it up when the car is turned on. And you see that little white plug there? That's the unused connection for the controls. I believe some of these control boxes have 4 knobs, mine only has 3. But basically there's 3 additional connections that look similar to that plug into the back of those knobs. These 2 connections you see right here are the main power and like positive and negative connections for the unit itself. So that's like the actual main power draw for the thing. I had to extend mine because the harness provided is designed to work with a battery that is still mounted in the engine bay. Obviously mine is in the trunk, so I made my own extensions and ran them inside the vehicle and connected them in there. And lastly, you see the ducting here. So they do provide 2 different sizes of duct. One smaller one for the defrosters and a larger one for the main 4 vents. They come as a single piece and they expect you to cut them to length, but they do tell you what length to cut them to. And it was a pretty straightforward process, to be completely honest. A little bit fiddly and a little bit of farting around getting them slipped over the vents themselves, but nothing too difficult. And I'd say that's actually been the theme of this whole install so far. A little bit annoying, a little bit of busted knuckle here or scrape there, and bolt not threading the first time, but nothing that a little perseverance didn't get me through at any step of this project. So now we're on to the what's next part of this, and essentially, as I mentioned, I've done everything inside the car and all the way back to the trunk. I've done the wiring harness, I've got everything ready, and basically now everything up to the firewall is done. So now I'm working on everything from the firewall forward, and essentially, if I were just kind of following a relatively stock install, that would be a little smoother. But being me, everything is custom. So I've already got a relatively custom setup on the engine itself, which has caused a couple little challenges. Plus, I'm very particular about the way things are laid out in the engine bay. So the brackets that the kit came with, for instance, put the AC compressor on the driver's side, and it's a high mount. So it's like right up in front of everything, which is, a pretty factory look, but it's also a pretty ugly look when you have a super cool intake manifold and all this other stuff that's done nice and clean. You just get this big, ugly, steel brackets. And I tried painting them aluminum silver and stuff like that, and I was gonna just go for it. And then I go to put them on and find out that they interfere with my valve cover anyway. It's like, they would sort of clear my headers, it was okay, but essentially the overhang of my valve cover, because they're a thicker cast aluminum, basically gets in the way of the bracket, so I'd have to machine those brackets. And that's not even the side I want the AC compressor on, and it's up top and ugly, and it would cause the hoses to route right across the top of the engine. Essentially, the compressor would be right up here in the middle of everything, and then 2 big hoses would run just straight through the middle of everything to that compressor, and it would just be this big ugly mess, which is just not how I roll. I've always really loved this mid-mount or low-mount alternator bracket that I got from ICT, the billet setup. I just love that it tucks it down out of the way. It really lets the engine, just show off unobstructed, right? But the challenge is they don't make one just like this for the other side of the engine, because my plan was to basically move the alternator over to this side. But I don't give up that easy. ICT does make billet brackets similar to that one that set the accessories further out but still relatively low, so the alternator would actually be somewhere over here, and essentially that moves it to the side that I want and still keeps it away from the engine, and that would also then allow me to do the mirrored bracket on this side, which is a very similar one that runs the AC compressor on this side. Now if you think about that as a whole, now that we have the AC compressor on this side close to these lines, everything can be done significantly neater. I can route them low and out of the way, they can be unobtrusive and stick just to the shortest possible path, and basically just have the cleanest possible install just by swapping the alternator to that side and letting the AC compressor hang out right around here. But like I said, with me, everything's got to be custom because it's not that easy. On a relatively stock vehicle, those brackets would bolt right on. It would be super easy. With my specific suspension setup, with the air ride on this exact car, my upper control arms get in the way, and basically I'm going to have to machine my brand new billet brackets to make sure they actually fit. Essentially, the brackets are triangular, so they use the 3 bolts on the cylinder head, and then they swing out low. And basically this is where I'm having my contact issue. When the car's at stock ride height, it just barely kisses this, but I can also lay this thing super low, and I do regularly, and this control arm, as you can imagine, lifts up as the car goes down. So I have to basically remove about ½ an inch of material off the underside of the rear bracket. Now if it was just one piece like this setup, I would be pretty concerned about machining off that much material, but the nice thing about these new ones is it's actually a double layer. So essentially, you know, you get a front and a rear piece of the bracket. The front will be untouched. The rear will just have a small amount of machining done to it, so it really won't have a structure issue where it gets weak. And these are my lovely brackets, minus one piece which is currently in the workshop being belt sanded, but as you can see, these are just nice, thick billet aluminum, very lightweight, and just have a nice finish to them. So this is the main bracket that goes at the back for the alternator setup. As you can see, these 3 bolt holes line up with the ones on the cylinder head here. And I have just an ever so slight clearance issue on this side as well, but not nearly as bad as the other side. Because like the other side, you know, because the engine's not mounted dead straight in these things, the other side sits more like that. This one sits just right at the edge. So I'm actually going to basically clearance the back of this just a little, and take probably about, you know, ½ inch or something off just to thin it out and give it a little space between the two. It basically already clears, but I just want to give it a little bit of wiggle room, you know, as these are rubber bushings and it does potentially have some play there. So this one I'm actually not too worried about. Again, just basically right where my thumb is here, I'm just going to kind of take a little bit of material off. And again, this has both a rear, which is this, and a front that's like this again, that hangs out here. And so basically we got plenty of structure, plenty of strength. So that's my goal for today, is I'm going to basically try and relocate the alternator over to the driver's side. I am going to go machine a little bit of stuff off of that back bracket there, and you know, move the alternator over. I've bought a little bit of 4-gauge battery wire so I can extend my connection from the starter to the alternator, and there's also a little plug where I'm going to have to kind of split it and extend those wires as well. And essentially, I'm hoping it's a relatively straightforward process, but once I move the alternator over to that side, that'll make my life a little easier as far as the machining and testing on the AC compressor side, because at that point the alternator won't be in the way anymore. So anyway, that does it for the update for now. You know, as we progress, I'll check in here and there. Like I said, I'm not an expert. This is not a standard install, so there was no way I was about to try and be like, hey, here's how to do a vintage air on a 59, because yours will probably be way different. I just want to let you guys tag along and see how it's going, and, you know, sharing the excitement when I first get it blowing cold air. So as always, this is the time in the video where I ask you to like and subscribe if you haven't already and you've seen a few of our videos. It really does help us grow the channel, and we appreciate every single one of you. We've been freight training along, and you guys have probably seen the growth. I mean, I think we just broke 1,400 subscribers, which is mind-blowing. I'm so happy that 1,400 people really do like the content we're generating. And again, if you like this video even slightly, I would just say go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and just check out some of the next videos that are coming out. If you don't like them, you can always unsubscribe down the road. But again, it's really helped support us. It's really helped get our content out there in front of other people. And, it's helping us pursue our passions and continue to grow. So thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.